The deconstruction process is necessary because there's a lot that we're given within evangelical structures that is not biblical, that does not actually love neighbor, that does not actually affirm the dignity of other people who are made in the image of God.
Welcome to Hopeful Exiles. If you're deconstructing, reconstructing, hurt or whole, a person of faith, or just trying to be a better human, welcome to an authentic community at the intersection of culture and Christianity. We are your guides, Matt and Ryan. Hey, Ryan.
What's up, Matt? What's up, guys? Welcome.
I'm so excited that we're starting this new project together. How about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the fulfillment of a lifelong dream, I guess. I don't know. And also, you and I both might have ADHD, so it's good to finally get active on it.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a long time. And for the audience, we're so glad that you're joining us. And we're going to just quickly give you a bit of a heads up as to what you're going to be expecting. You already heard it a bit in the introduction. But this is really a podcast, a journey. We want this to be a journey, a community as well.
Yeah.
For folks like you who may be in that deconstruction stage, or you're reconstructing, coming out of evangelicalism, or some other kind of a Christian form within the faith tradition. Maybe you're just hurting and you're just trying to, kind of rediscover who God is in all of this. And is any of this even worth believing in anymore? We're here to kind of maybe hopefully be a guide in a really safe and authentic place for you. But let's begin. Ryan, who or what is a hopeful exile?
That's a great question. I'll give you a little bit of where I'm at. I love Jesus. I have always, pursued God, and within a church context. I've also been really hurt from churches and from the spiritual organizations I was a part of. So I find myself in this place of being cast out in many senses, and still having this militant hope in my soul. Like, no, I know who God is. I know who Jesus is. I think the story of Jesus is the most beautiful story I've ever heard. And yet I'm also, like, just being honest, deeply nauseated by what I see with most churches. Part of which is because I'm a part of churches and I do some nauseating stuff sometimes. But I think that ultimately being a hopeful exile is longing for the fulfillment of what you were promised in the scriptures, in the idea of the church as a family, the idea of church as a healing place, a hospital, in the idea of the church as net good, as a wholeness bringer in the world. And as an exile, being on the outside looking in, being like, man, I'm glad I'm not there. I'm really sad I'm not there. I think all of that, the dissonance of like, man, I an exile belongs somewhere and is outside of that space. And so whether willingly or unwillingly. So yeah.
Hey, I want to call you out on something though. You said right away from the beginning, the word militant came out of your mouth, and I got to tell you, like, I threw up a bit in my mouth. So you're going to have to you're going to have to calm me down for a second, because I'm about ready to head to the bathroom on that one.
Well, I will tell you, listen, your boy is cringy. I'm cringy and I don't really care. I have discovered in this process, and we'll get into some of that, as disappointing as life has been, as truly like horrific as some of the things that have happened in the last couple years have been, I have a hope that will not die in my soul, a militant hope that goes to war, that will not.
Are you talking about flag waving, militant hope, and patriotism, and
No.
Don't tread on me flags, the Christian flag?
No. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about.
Just want to make sure. I just got to clarify for my own. I know you, but I just got to clarify for my audience who's listening now, because now they're not sure what they just tuned into.
What I'm trying to say is, I realized that the discouragement, the disillusionment, the hypocrisy that I was experiencing, God built me tougher than that. And in the midst of some of the most hurtful moments of my life, I really believe that Jesus is still my guy, and I long to be a part of a church that actually accomplishes the mission it says that it wants to accomplish. And I'm militantly committed to helping build.
You're doubling down on it. Got it.
I'm tripling down. Yeah.
Resilient. It's a resilient hope.
It's resilient.
I appreciate that very much, because honestly, that's where That is what brought us together in this journey. Like you and I both have been hurt, wounded. I mean, we are. I mean, let's just be honest. We are victims of injustice that has occurred within the church context, specifically the
Yeah.
evangelical church, and even more specifically,
Yeah.
predominantly white evangelicalism. And
Mm,
we've been
mm.
victims of injustice within these spaces,
Yeah.
right? And I'm white, and it's like, and I can call it out and say, like, dang, what is
Yeah.
wrong with us?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's good.
that has sent us on journeys of wondering, what does all this mean? Not just my own
Yeah.
story, not just my own experience, but more importantly, is this faith, these stories that we read in the scriptures, are they even still worth following? Are they still worth
Yes.
believing in?
Yep.
How much of this actually holds up, especially given the
Hmm.
time in which we're living in right now? And
Yeah.
we talk about, and we'll expand on this more, but really that intersection of culture and Christianity is a dangerous intersection right now.
Yes.
It is frightening, it is noisy, it is loud, and it's not just a cross, just not like a four-way intersection. This thing's like a 30-way intersection, and there are cars zipping and flying by. I mean, I almost actually had the picture of the Jetsons in my mind now. Like I'm dating myself, but like where they kind of have like the layers of space
Yeah.
planes, and stuff in
Yeah.
cars. And so it's a noisy, busy, messy place to be at right now. And I think what we have seen, that so many people that we know and even ourselves have tried to eject ourselves from that space, have tried to remove ourselves from that space, to distance ourselves.
Mm.
And so I feel like that's kind of where that exile piece comes from, whether you've been kicked out of it or you're not, we don't need you in this space, or it's
Mhm.
just so noisy. It's like, I just need a break. I need to refine
Yeah.
myself in all of this.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like that there is, when you go into that space of quietness, aloneness, you step away from that intersection, you start to realize you can kind of rediscover those values and kind of rediscover and kind of go on that spiritual journey,
Yeah.
and then be able to hopefully re-engage and kind of discover, like, well, I have to live at that intersection because that's the only one that's available to me right now. is
Yeah.
is I'm somebody who's exploring this faith, or I'm still want to commit to it, but I'm not quite sure where it belongs or how to do it. But I got to
Right.
live in this culture, I got to live in society, I've got to go to work, I've got to
Right.
engage with my friends and my family. So how do I do
Mm.
this well? And that is
Yeah.
really what has led us to this place of us now living and doing this podcast together, is because of our own stories and our own journey, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we want more. We want a church that delivers on its promise. We want spiritual organizations that actually mirror the heart of God. And I think, like, we've recognized, like, we're not the answers. We're gonna fail.
Yeah.
And also, that's okay. And that's part of the journey. I think the big thing for us is we want to create a space for people reconstructing, deconstructing, who are just like, man, I want real community. We live, I mean, the statistics on loneliness right now are staggering. And I think what we naturally encountered was in our own exiles, no matter how we found ourselves in exile, you and I really connected on like a deep soul level and have been such an encouragement to each other along each of our individual journeys and now our collective journey. And we just want to offer that to other people. Hey, we don't have it all together. We're still figuring it out. We have good days, bad days, but the beauty of walking together and being on the journey together is worth it, and has given us like, has really reignited hope in our hearts as well.
Yeah, I affirm that so much, and it's just it's just such a joy to be able to sit with you, Ryan. Both of you and I, we live in South Florida, so
Mhm.
we're kind of in that Miami metropolitan broad area,
Yeah, Fort
and
Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale, exactly. And so it's like we're living in this pretty like complex space of
Mhm.
of people and
Yeah.
politics and culture, and then of course then there's the church in here trying to make its way and rediscovering itself in a really complex space.
Yeah.
And yet there's still this you can see this desire to really want to contribute in these positive ways. And you and I were this is not going to be a space where we're going to sit here and tear down and bemoan the failures of the Christian church. This is not what we want it to be. But we know that you as an audience have found us, or are finding us, because of your own journeys, your own stories, your
Mhm.
own experiences. And for us, we're the ones we're finding we've been through this.
Yeah.
We've experienced it, and maybe not your story particularly, but something like it. And, we we still have hope. We still believe that the church can really be a, a, a place of hope, and a place of, 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 a very authentic place, a very
Hmm.
hopeful place,
Yeah.
and a very transformational place, not just for us as individuals, but even as whole cultures and societies.
Yeah.
And so we actually have a bigger, and like you said, Ryan, a bigger vision, a greater vision. It has a higher calling and higher
Yes.
standards that it should
Yes.
and it must
Yeah.
adhere to in order for it to still be relevant. But I actually say that, but the statistics in the United States in the last decade, by the way, 11% it saw its Christianity saw its first decline in affiliation by a whole 11% in the last decade. It's the first time Christianity has declined in North America ever
Yeah.
since it was introduced, right? And so
Yeah.
I think if there's one thing that the church can learn from that, it is not that wokeism came for it, but that church has failed to
Yes.
remain a cultural relevance and
Yes.
a voice into society that it is desperately asking for. And when it has chosen to engage, it chooses the wrong battles and has chosen evil
Mm,
and wickedness over goodness. That's my
yeah.
claim.
I love that. I think exactly what you're saying. The purpose of this is not to be messy. We're not going to be using names. We're not going to be, trying to tear down organizations. We're like, listen, they can do whatever they want to do. The hope here is we want to acknowledge, because of our own experiences, the way that there has been an immense amount of hurt in these spaces. We want to diagnose the consistency in the themes and the patterns and the systems and the structures. And in diagnosing those things, we want to figure out how to heal, how to build something more holistic, more better, more just, more in line with God's heart, more holy, like all of those things. And for me, I think that means that, like, I've been legitimately horrified by the number of people who are like, well, you can't say that. I'm like, say what? Like, you can't say that we're failing. I'm like, but we are. Like, the only way you can figure out how to be better is if you just acknowledge the truth. Like, hey, this thing we're not great at. Anyway, the whole purpose is not to dwell on the failure. It's to build towards beauty and success and actually accomplishing the mission and the vision. That's our hope. That's our hearts. Why we chose a I think a very good title, but a sort of cringy title, Hopeful Exiles. Is like, man, like, it's our superpower. I mean, as we talk to people, I mean, like, literally people will say all the time, like, how, Ryan, how do you still want to do that, to be a part of that? And I'm like, man, it's worth everything, but it's going to take some work to get there. And so this is our shot at doing the work to get to the thing that we long for, that are like the sort of space that brings healing and hope, and is still truth telling, but invites people into relationship and authenticity and vulnerability. And here it is.
Look, I think it has so much to do with looking toward the promised land.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, theologically, those who've grown up in the church can choose a slice or an illustration any which way you want to do that. But the idea is just imagine what does the promise look like? As you said
Hmm.
earlier, Ryan, what
Yeah.
does hope look like? What does a better tomorrow look like for you and your family, your community,
Yeah.
and our nation and the world as a whole? And just
Yeah.
imagine what that will start to look like in matters of justice, right? In matters
Hmm.
of goodness and wholeness that we're trying to achieve. And we think that actually the Christian message has so much to offer us,
Hmm.
even if it's 2,000 or years or older, even when you go back to the Old Testament. I mean, there's so much in those stories and that, especially that message of Jesus, that honestly just speaks so much to love your neighbors, you love yourself. How much more foundational
Mm,
and transformational can that possibly be? And yet somehow we feel like we're losing that message. We're losing
yeah.
that self-sacrifice and that beauty,
Hmm.
which really I think brings us to the point of the stories that have brought us together. Because you and Ryan, you and I are not just some guys and some dudes who've been hurt by the church. We actually have worked in the church. We started kind of alluding to that earlier, but you and I we've worked in the church.
Hmm.
We're not just products of it, but we're actually the propagators. We have served it. We have in good ways and probably in ways that we somewhat
Yeah.
regret.
Yep. Agreed.
We've been in this space, haven't we?
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Yeah. So I have worked in ministry for almost 20 years now. I think maybe we're right at 20. But I have served as a worship leader, still serve as a worship leader in different contexts. And I was a college pastor for some years. Even saying the word past that I was a pastor, that I am a pastor, like, makes me sort of throw up in my mouth a little bit, because I never wanted to be a pastor.
You are
But
a militant pastor, and there
I'm a
we go.
listen.
We'll just put both words out there right now. You are definitely not a militant
I'm
pastor.
gonna
I
I'm
know
gonna
militant pastors. You are
I'm
not
gonna
one of them.
punch you in your Matt's apple when I see you next for harping on that. But yeah, I mean, I've done a ton of stuff in ministry, everything from like ground floor to high level, and I think like for me, it just comes down to, man, I think the story of Jesus is so beautiful. Like I've never heard another story like Jesus's story, and like I think even the idea, I got my degree in religion from the University of Florida, which was quite a mess, the process of me doing that. But like they teach you as a religion scholar, like, to survey the religious structures that you're looking at. So like, you're cataloging, you're not evaluating the truth claims. You're just saying, oh, this is what they believe or whatever. And ultimately, and this is echoed in other places, but like religion is kind of trying to make our way to God. It is. And I think the idea that God would make his way to us, that like all of these belief systems are trying to work their way up the mountain to get to God, and that God would come down and pick me up and take me to the top of the mountain. I'm like, oh, there's just nothing like that story. I would give my life for that story. And as I was operating in these spaces, I found that that wasn't what this was all about. There was a lot of red tape. There was a lot of politicking. There was a lot of red lines that I wasn't allowed to cross that no one told me. There was a lot of my existence that became controversial despite the fact that I have no idea why. And so, yeah, so I found myself, exactly like you said, being a part of the whole project, and then kind of slowly and sometimes very quickly, abruptly being pushed out of the systems, being fired from different spaces, different churches, and the pain of that, the lingering hurt and disillusionment of that really being a significant portion of the strangeness of the hope that I feel now.
What's it like to be working like, I think depending upon how what some people have experienced, like, their church context. I mean, there's a lot of different types of churches out there that
Hmm.
operate very differently because of their tradition and their background of like how we hire pastors and
Yeah.
and people who facilitate worship music, which is what you spent all of your time doing, most of your time doing, is
Yeah.
leading and using your incredible gifts of music to lead congregations. And you're also very intentional with people, so you love being like, working with discipleship and Bible studies and things like that. But like, tell us, like, I've never been fired from a church. I've left churches. I've almost been fired from one. But like,
Yeah.
what's it like to be released and fired from a church, specifically even like the most recent one? Like,
Yeah.
what's that experience like? And if you want to share what led to that, like
Yeah.
what was the big thing that caused that to happen?
Yeah, and this is I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I'll tell you, spoiler alert, it does not feel good. It's not a fun experience to be fired from a space. I'll tell you, I am very, very loyal. So when I commit myself to a space, I'm all in. And so I'm not the sort of person that's like, things are not going well, I'm gonna leave. What I do is I'm like, hey, let's figure out how to move forward. So I'll tell you, there's a lot of betrayal and abandonment and significant pain in this process, because like specifically for the last church that I was at, I moved my family here. Now again, we made the decision together, my wife and I. My wife is, let me tell you, my wife is a boss. She's a baller.
I
And we
can
made
affirm that.
yes, she is a force of nature, in the best way possible. And I legitimately, I moved my family here just so for people to understand a little bit of my story. I am same-sex attracted, gay, depending on what terminology you use. But I experienced attraction towards men, recognized that as a part of my story very early on, but slowly over the years became more able to just put words on it and to just acknowledge it as the truth of my life. Like, really found it difficult to find any sort of understanding or space to really embody that in church. And by that, I mean, just like, I just want to be able to say like, hey, this is my experience. I'm not saying that I'm actively engaging in any kind of what, I'm not doing any of that. I'm married to a woman and I have kids. Okay. Like my choices, my identity is very, very clear. And also my experience is I experienced attraction towards men. I prayed for years and years and years. If you could pray it away, I would have prayed it away. It's not going away. And for whatever reason, God in his sovereignty and his goodness is like, hey, I'm going to give you my strength to walk this out. Those are my convictions. Again, depending on who's listening, that might be like, oh, that's very weird. Some people might be like, that's exciting. Some people might be very disappointed. And that's honestly, part of the journey here, we don't have to all agree with each other and our choices, but you and I have kind of also been in the space of like, I'm walking with you regardless of whether or not I agree with all your choices. And so that's been the vibe. But yeah, in that vein, like I'm like, hey, I'm here to do the work. I love doing the work of ministry. I love loving people. I really feel like my life mission is to help people connect with God and figure out who they were made to be. And then over and over, I've run up against the same sort of issues of, well, we don't like this way that that you're existing in this space, or fighting for people. Like justice is big for me. Like if we are crushing people in our pursuit of making a larger organization, of reaching more people, I'm like, but we should not be crushing people. We cannot. That's antithetical to what we say we're trying to do. And so, yeah, so in this last thing in particular, I was told a bunch of things about the church space that I was going into, and kind of pitched a version of it that was like, this is a wide open space of ministry and we're trying to do all these things. I was very clear, like, hey, I'm coming from a place of hurt and I can't tiptoe anymore. Like I need the space to just be who God made me to be, and to be able to lovingly tell the truth, to gracefully tell the truth, which I feel like I really try to do. I mean, people can evaluate that, but my heart has always been very pure in that I'm always going to tell the truth in love, but tell the truth. And so coming into this space that I was in, it was incredibly disheartening to realize that like the thing that I was told was happening was not happening. And that there was really good intentions. There were really good intentions that ultimately were hampered by people pleasing and just wanting to like as a leader, one of the first things you learn as a leader is you're just not going to please everyone. You have to have a vision and to accomplish that and to execute on that. And I think I got caught up in the crossfire. And so anyway, what happened was I was asked to preach. I preached a sermon about politics. I chose the subject of politics because, again, discipleship is my passion. And what I found as we were entering last year and we were approaching an election is that people were not loving each other well, which is an issue of discipleship. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, no, I just want to interrupt just for a second before you continue on this, because I know the story. I've been there with you in this.
Yeah.
Let's just make sure the audience is clear. Ryan is incredibly gifted. He's very talented. There's not been a job performance issue here,
No.
right?
Nope.
He's always been upfront. Ryan is a very upfront person. He's one of the most upfront people I know.
To a fault.
And yeah, and he's very vulnerable, right? And so him sharing with you now, the audience, that he is identifies as gay or same-sex attracted is not something. If you didn't know that about him because you knew him personally, it's there may be a reason for that. But he's very quick to make sure that people know about this information. But he was in an environment, am I right about, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but you were in an environment that the leadership embraced you as you are, as you were. Ryan never changed.
No.
Ryan was always the same, but now, but there was a oppressive spirit. There was an oppressive leadership that was taking place that kept that part of you hidden.
Yeah.
And am I correct in that?
Yeah. And I think, very certain people within that space had really good intentions and a really good heart. And then there were other people that had, just some absolute scoundrels. And I'm gonna just say scoundrels. So I'm gonna say nothing else because,
I bring this up because this actually speaks to the heart of not just justice that you and I are both very passionate about, but also the heart of the purpose of this podcast and what it means to be a hopeful exile. Is Ryan was living in exile inside his own context that he was paid to do, right? And when you're oppressed in exile, it's not hopeful, but it's frustrating. Right.
Yeah. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of frustration, especially because the core things that I said I wanted to do, they also said they wanted to do. And so case in point, I'm asked to preach. I preached a sermon on politics. I'm like, hey, this is because again, the whole sermon was a kingdom of God political ethic is centered in radical love of neighbor. Love your neighbor. Well, who's my neighbor? Well, the good Samaritan parable that Jesus tells us that like even your enemy is your neighbor. So love your enemy. Love your enemy because your enemy is your neighbor. That's what God commands of you if you love Jesus. That was kind of the whole thing. There's a bunch of other stuff in there, but ultimately some people got upset, which we knew was going to happen. Everybody knew what was going on. The elders knew, pastor knew, like it was very like I had multiple conversations. And essentially what happened is some people got upset. Some people were thrilled with it. Some people got upset. And over time, what happened is there was this entire grievance machine that I was unaware of and that people were really, really upset about. And again, not saying that I do everything perfectly. I'm not perfect. I'm the first one to tell you when I failed, and I fail at a lot of things. And so, but anyway, I was able, we talked about the same-sex attraction thing, figuring into all of this, because I had people saying, well, what makes you think that we're crushing people? And why do you think that we're not, why do you think we're not loving LGBTQ people well? I'm like, well, kind of a subject area expert. And then that became weaponized. And then I was literally, I was placed on leave for 6 weeks and then fired. And literally it was because I was quote unquote prideful and because of issues surrounding my Christian identity. Meanwhile, my identity has not changed. My behavior has not changed. I have done all of the same things I've always done, but now I'm prideful because some people were upset and because the leadership was taking heat. And I say all that to say there are systemic things in this space that prevent the work that they say they want to accomplish, that we want to accomplish. And it's why, for me, this season has been so painful because, like, I've lost a lot of relationships. I mean, there are people that there is no relationship, and I want to be very clear. I believe in reconciliation. I believe in reaching out. What's wild to me is that instead of actually acknowledging where we're wrong, we're doubling down on people pleasing, which my thing is like, listen, whatever attitude of truth you deliver to LGBTQ people when you're trying to elucidate the scriptures, keep that same energy with everybody else, you know? So it's wild to me that there are the, like, I feel like I did everything that was asked of me. I feel like I really tried to jump through the hoops, and I was like, it's just been a really crazy season. And coming out of that, I'm like, we have to address the larger system at play. We have to address the larger systemic issues that keep people from hearing the truth of the scriptures. Like, why are certain things biblical and other things that are like stated in scripture even more so?
Yeah.
Why is that foreign? Why was my vulnerability taken as a weakness and then literally used as a weapon against me? Now, again, to be clear, like, I feel great. I'm like, man, I'm living my life right now. The Lord is with me. I got the best wife that's ever lived on the planet. I got amazing kids. I've got an amazing community. I'm good. But I know I'm not alone. I've talked to many people who have been crushed, shattered by the church. I've talked to some people that have been fired from ministry spaces. And ultimately it's like, oh, is that embarrassing to reveal? I'm like, not really, because I know who I am.
Yeah.
I'm good. Like, so I'm ready to like begin the work of let's build something better. Let's build something more in line with God's heart. Let's go for it, you know?
I so appreciate your story, and thanks, Ryan, just leading with your vulnerability in this space. And I hope it's a comfort for some people who are like, or at least identify maybe like you, or at least kind of hear your story and go, yeah, I've seen that take place in other spaces. I think what you're articulating is that systemic issue that so often the church and its line of what they eventually call sin is it's constantly moving and it's constantly
Yes.
adjusting.
Yes.
And there are a lot of different factors that play into that, but apparently even in your own story, in this particular space, who you were was considered good and right. And then at some point there was a decision that said, no, part of it's not okay. It is sin after
Right.
all.
Right.
And, and I think a lot of us who have been on this journey, that deconstruction journey, those who've been disillusioned by the Christian church in these spaces, especially coming out of fundamentalism, you recognize that pattern very easily, very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yep.
And so, like you, I have this similar story where mine is actually kind of more in the presence of like same thing. I grew up in the Christian church, but yet and was exposed early on to these amazing stories of God at work and throughout all scripture, we see the stories of Jesus. We see his compassion for the children, his love for all people, and so we have these wonderful stories and even the miracles of healing and hope. And then even like when I can remember like moments in college that when I finally went away, because I grew up in a very, homogenous white suburban community and then I go away to school in downtown Chicago. And that was quite a bit of a culture shock for me. But
Mm.
suddenly I'm exposed to new to new people, new ideas, new cultures, and so I like it was actually really a thrilling time, but also a bit of a like one of like, wow, this is like challenging some of the things that I knew. My last name is Till. I was sitting at college hanging out with some of my classmates, and they were asking me if I was related to Emmett Till. Now,
Well,
I had no idea, and, like, I thought that was a little strange, but I'm like, "I don't even know
yeah.
who this is."
Wow.
Like that, I distinctly remember that. Like, how is it that I don't
Mm.
know the story of Emmett Till? And that is a fundamental story, especially among the Black community in
Yes.
Chicago. And
Yeah.
I'm like, "How do I not know the story?" Now, I don't blame my
Hmm.
parents for that. I mean, I don't even think
Sure.
they really
Yeah.
resonate with the story of it, but it's more like, how did my education and my upbringing not bring this forward? Like, how is this not like, I share the same last name, but there's no relationship whatsoever, within the
Hmm.
family, line, but I just thought, "Wow, this is a huge story out of the civil rights movement, and it's a gruesome one."
Yeah.
But how did I not know about that?
Yeah.
And so those kind of moments have, over time, opened my eyes to systemic injustice and more importantly, the work of
Mm.
power and privilege. And while at the same time, I found myself in these conservative evangelical spaces that was providing all sorts of wonderful certainty in my life that I felt like I needed in this time. And
Mm.
so I lived with this dissonance for years, and I finally ended up realizing, like, I think I want to go into the ministry, and I really like have this, like you, Ryan, just have this resilient hope. Like,
Mm.
hey, things are kind of busted, things are kind of broken, but I still see this message in what who Jesus says he is, and what has been recorded and how people have responded in faith over 2,000 years since the death and the resurrection of Christ. Like, I
Right.
still see, like, lives transformed. My own life has been transformed by this story.
Yeah.
My own life has been shaped by this. I have lived to be a better
Mm.
person because
Mm.
of Jesus. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like, I still think there's something valuable here to live into. And so I pursued ministry. I got a degree, I got a master's degree in theology.
Come on.
I left my former career in broadcast television, which you can see the Emmy behind me. I actually have two of them,
Come on.
but
Mm.
right. I've
Bro,
got
what
two.
a flex, dude. It's awesome.
So, like, but like, I left that career to go
Yeah.
into pastoral ministry. Now having my master's, and then eventually I planted a church, but now I planted a church in 2017. And then during that time, now the
Mm.
country's like in a totally new political environment, and mega churches in the area we're going through in Chicago, we're going through some major drama, and I had actually worked for one of them at some point,
Mm.
and I had seen for for a number of years, been on the inside of these working for narcissistic,
Mm.
um, pastoral leaders who were just the kindest and most, like, strong. They were very, like, powerful speakers. They had a great dynamic, but my gosh, they were incredibly hurtful, behind the
Mm.
scenes. They were abusive. It's such an abusive culture, verbally, emotionally, even spiritually.
Mm.
Those were hard things to reconcile and left me very confused. We went to go plant our church, and that was it was a sweet season, but that season wasn't still lacked, or like we kind of struggled into, once we got into like the COVID pandemic,
Yeah.
that it began to come apart a little bit, for us. And so we had some new opportunities that brought us down here to South Florida.
Mm.
And it's been in that season where, in everything going on in our world politically, watching my evangelical tribe that
Mm.
I had been dedicating a lot of my adult years to literally implode
Mm.
and choose things that are more aligned with wickedness and
Yeah.
evil than goodness and wholeness. That has sent me to a place where I then began to wonder, how much of this is this a fluke,
Yeah.
or is it a feature?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people are asking that question of like, I think the deconstruction process, I think people look at, and especially within evangelical spaces, it's like, oh, they're deconstructing. It's like, oh, no, the boogeyman. It's like, no, this is actually really good. Like, deconstruction was miserable and awful in my life. In fact, I'm still deconstructing my experiences, which has been really good because I realized there were things that I was told growing up that just weren't true. There were things that I was given in my spiritual formation in some of the spaces that wasn't true. There
Yeah.
were shadows that were being hidden
Uh,
that needed to come into the light and be exposed. And let me tell you, this is where you can tell, and this is where I'm going to take some shots. This is where you can tell if someone actually believes if God is strong or if the gospel is real. Because it's always the people who don't actually believe in the sovereignty of God and the people who don't actually believe that Jesus can actually save people, who will then try to tell people not to deconstruct and all kinds of stuff. If God is powerful, they will find their way back. It's like and I don't know
Yeah.
if it was C.S. Lewis, but it was like, there's this thing of like, how do you defend a lion? It's like you let it out of its cage. And I think the
It
reality
defends
is
itself.
it defends itself. And my frustration in this space is
Yeah.
like, we're gonna do our best to teach you, like even in this endeavor that we're doing, we're gonna do our best and we're not gonna get it right. And that's
Yeah.
okay. And when we get it wrong, Matt, you and I we're gonna repent first. And we're gonna
Yeah.
repent the loudest. Like repenting means to change your direction. Literally, we're gonna go in a different direction first. But like in these spaces, I completely lost my train of thought. I remember what I was saying. That's such a Ryan moment. What was I saying?
You're on a riff, man, and you were just like going to town here
I know.
about deconstruction, and those
Oh,
who
yeah.
reject deconstruction are the ones who are least likely to trust in
Yes.
God in that process. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yes. And basically, the deconstruction process is necessary because there's a lot that we're given within evangelical structures that is not biblical, that does not actually love neighbor, that does not actually affirm the dignity of other people who are made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, if we walk with each other on this process, like there can be a really beautiful reconstruction. Like for me, it wasn't that, like I had many days where I was like, is Jesus real? And spoiler alert, my answer, I'm like, yes. And
Mm-hmm.
he's good. And his
Mm-hmm.
story is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's doing in my life is beautiful. But it took me going through that journey. And I think as a community, we need to champion people asking harder questions, going through these times and these moments and not being afraid, because if God really can finish the work that he started in us, that means that when we ask hard questions and we have doubts, that he can handle it and that we can handle it. And I think as a community, we have got to just rally around people and say, no, you do need to ask questions about your leadership. You need to deconstruct the hyper hierarchical structures that led to people getting crushed and thrown out and cast out and pushed out. And like, you need to do that work. Like you need to ask better questions about the sort of belief structures that you're engaging with. And that's what we want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% with you on that, and agree. And what I have found to be the most destructive is when you come into this space and you choose this belief system, because it is a system, that you all of a sudden there's a quick insulation that begins to come around you that attempts to, at least I've found in the most unhealthy spaces, that project themselves as being the most authoritative, convincing,
Yes.
secure,
Yep.
and confident. They're overly confident of themselves, and they are the ones that create a bubble. And they start they literally look like and begin to have cult-like behaviors, except there's just usually not an individual leader that runs it. The most unhealthy spaces clearly do, but there's this cultish kind of attitude that begins to insulate you because you become a part of the tribe, you become part of the movement.
Right.
And that movement has a very narrow view and will seek to do whatever it takes to prevent you from exposure from outside of the movement.
Yeah.
And in reality, Christianity has not behaved that way. It has always been in the public square. It is always engaged. That is why we talk about what does it mean to be a hopeful exile, but we're living at that intersection of Christianity and also in culture. And that if you actually, like, you're a person shaped by this culture, and if you're somebody of faith or exploring the faith, then you're also shaped by it too. And the two things are going to be running into each other constantly, and you have to engage it. And you have to be able to listen. You have to be able to listen. And that's what you were talking about, Ryan. It's about listening. It's about hearing. It's about sharing stories. It's about hearing from other people's experiences and exposing the systems at play that have maybe kept us, especially those who have maybe not gone through that deconstruction process, trapped into a religious dogma that actually makes you really antagonistic and, all I say, militant against the culture in the world, right? Which is why I was also really kind of hampering on you on that word earlier, because I actually have a more of a negative connotation to it, but I understand your positive one. So for me, it's about resilience, right? And how do we have a resilient faith and still hold true to some foundational beliefs, but also be able to say, hey, I love my gay brother, Ryan, and I'm super excited to be doing this podcast with you. So thanks just for the privilege to do this with you, man.
Well, and I think the beauty of what you even just, like, You really don't like this is something I'm just finding out today. I was today years old when I found out that Matt is slightly triggered by my use of the word militant. Did not know. And again, this is the beauty of real community, of authentic community, of the sort of community that's made when you're in the trenches with each other. I'm probably still going to use that word, and Matt's going to have to deal with it. And Matt's going to fire back at my usage of that word, and we're going to disagree. And you know what? I am still just as committed to Matt as I've ever been, because I don't need Matt to agree with me on everything, and I don't want Matt to agree with me on everything. Like, we are committed to each other, and we're walking the journey out. And that's what it looks like. And I think, like, even as we move forward, like, Matt, what sort of topics are we going to be covering that there's going to be probably significant disagreement over? Like, what sort of things are we looking to do here? What are we trying to do? Because again, want to clarify, the goal here is not 100% agreement. The goal here is, let's walk together as we figure it out in the messiest, in the most annoying ways possible. This is not going to be a community that's built on ease. This is going to be a community that's built on soul level commitment to each other and each other's good, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right on. And not toxic positivity
Oh
either.
yeah. Not that. Definitely not that.
Yeah. But again, and even as we said, like, it's not about tearing everything down. It's just about, like, being honest and being
Yes.
open and being authentic and vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
With our stories and with the world, and
Yeah.
really reconciling and working through these issues. So,
Yeah.
like you said, some of the things we want to talk about, and more importantly for the audience, thanks for sticking with us. But I feel like we want this to be a space for you.
Yes.
We want
Yes.
to engage the issues that matter to you. So we want to be
Mm-hmm.
hearing from you. We'll kick things off as we get going in this and make sure you have ways to connect with Ryan and I. But some of the things that we're really passionate about are, of course, we've been talking a lot about it here on this episode, and we'll dig into it more. But what is evangelicalism more specifically? And
Mm-hmm.
it's a broad tent as well, but
Yes.
evangelicalism and deconstruction look like. And then we also want to hit issues of gender and race and
Yes.
Christianity and sexuality. I missed that one, but we already are already talking about that one here today too. But we'll
Yeah.
explore those issues further. What do politics and faith look like? Again, another issue that really has, like, sent Ryan out of a church. It honestly drove me away from the faith tradition for some time, and has caused me to really evaluate and think about where I stand and
Yeah.
what my values are, but not just politics and faith, but even the politics of faith as sometimes an instrument for politics.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and of course, like, something we're really passionate about too is, what does community hurt and healing look
Mm.
like?
Yeah.
How do we wrestle through those seasons of, like, man, I've just been burned by this community. I don't even know how they'll even either accept me back, or even if I want to go back to them, if I even want to
Mm.
engage with them, I think is a real honest question that we want to be exploring and talking about.
Yeah.
And then,
How
of
do you?
course, just even just broadly speaking to, like, journeying toward a more holistic gospel. Like, what is,
Yeah.
Ryan, you're saying, like, how do you how does the lion defend its, how do you defend the lion? It defends itself. Like,
Yeah.
if the gospel is truly the message that we as Christians have been told to believe, that is really the hope of the world,
Mm-hmm.
then, and if it is truly a life-giving message, then it's going to have to be bigger than what our
Yes.
ideology or our tribes have often told us it is.
Yes.
That's just the reality. We're walking into a really uncharted territory in human history.
Mm-hmm.
People have tried to say this before, but this is, like, really honest to goodness. Like, in the next 5 to 10 years, we are walking into truly uncharted territory.
Yes.
And the gospel is either holistic, it's for everyone, or it's only for a few. And we're going
Come
to
on.
literally kill ourselves over it.
Come on. Yeah, I like, my thing is, like, I am just tired of being hampered by people's weak gospel and their weak God. Because
Oh,
that's not my
oh,
God, and that's not the
mm,
gospel that he gave me.
mm.
And so, yeah, if my brokenness is enough to completely invalidate what I was told my entire life, then one of us is wrong and one of us is right. I'm willing to bet my life that I'm right, based off of
Yeah,
my understanding of the scriptures, based off of God's power displayed in my life. So let's go there. Let's do that. Let's build something around that, and let's challenge each other to grow in the meanwhile.
that's right. That's right. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up there. What do you think, Ryan?
I love it, bro. This is great.
Yeah.
Super excited.
Me too. Thanks for just the audience for joining in on us on this first episode of Hopeful Exiles. And please share it with your friends, however you're getting your podcast delivered to you. It's also in video form as well too. So the best way that you like to either watch or listen, will you please share it with other people? If you found this of interest or any help to you, if you've resonated with the topics here that we've been talking about, we could really use you. So like it, share it, rate it in your podcast apps, and tell everyone that you can to join us on this journey. And you'll be watching for that next episode to drop really soon. And we look forward to for being a part of the journey with us here on Hopeful Exiles.
Love y'all.